All right, good morning, everyone. Glad you're here with us today. Hey, for all of you who prayed for snow, stop praying, all right? Hey, well, welcome. Really glad you're here. It's kind of weird just to hear Christmas talk because doesn't it seem like Christmas was like ages ago, you know, and it's only like 10 days ago, and here we are in 2015. We're in a brand new year, and there's something about a new year. I don't know about you, but you just start thinking about different things. You start thinking about changes. How many of you made some sort of New Year's resolution, whether you just wrote it down or in your mind, you kind of lodged in there? How many of you made something? All right, 2 of you. That's great. Well, how many of the 2 of you are still going strong in it? Still gutting it out? Day 4, you're like, I'm still strong in it. Hey, that's great. I was reading some articles about New Year's resolutions, and I read this article about this lady. In 2013, her New Year's resolution was that she was going to eat only food from Starbucks for the whole year. Now, I'm not sure why she picked Starbucks. If I'm her, I'm going to pick McDonald's or something else, but she picked Starbucks, and here's the thing. She did it. She actually did it, and it reports that she had to spend about $700 a month on food, you know, and I'm not a Starbucks guy, but you know, really? Food at Starbucks? And here's what I'm thinking as I'm reading this article. You know, if I'm her friend and she tells me that, I mean, what do you say to that? Hey, I think my New Year's resolution is this. Hey, congratulations. You know, good job. I hope that really changed your life. I mean, you know, there's just some crazy resolutions. I was reading this cartoon, and the cartoon said this: my New Year's resolution is to stop lying to myself about making lifestyle changes. And I think, you know, whether you're going to make a New Year's resolution or not, when you turn the page to a new year, there's just something about a fresh start where we begin thinking about, okay, this is new. I want to start fresh with some things. You know, for some of you, you're thinking about a fresh start with your health. And you're thinking, this is the year, I'm going to lose weight, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to get in shape. You know, for others of you, you're thinking a fresh start when it comes to your family. And you're going, last year I worked too much, but this year I'm going to focus more time at home. I'm going to spend some more time with the kids. We're going to take a vacation this year so we can have some concentrated time together. For others of you, you know, you're having a fresh start with your finances. And you're thinking, this is the year I'm going to make a budget, and I'm going to follow the budget. And I'm going to live within my means. I'm going to set some money aside to save. I'm going to honor God with some of that as well. But I'm going to have a fresh start financially. For some of you, it's with your work. And maybe you're here and you own a business, and this is the year where you go, you know, we're going to try to achieve some things this year that we've never achieved before. Or maybe you know, there's a certain profession that you're in, and you're looking at your profession and you're going, I really want to get better at my craft, whatever it is. And you're just going to invest in yourself so you become better in your craft. And for some of you, you want a fresh start with God. Some of you are here are already following Jesus, and you're going to take some steps this year that you've never taken before. And others of you, you're just kind of stepping back in and you're restarting your spiritual journey. And so you're going to get a fresh start there. But there's just something about a new year that makes us to want to do things differently this upcoming year than we did the last year. Now, this is why we're starting this series called Fresh Start. You know, for some of you, you know, you are a New Year's resolution person, but what you don't realize is this is the 10th year in a row that you have made this resolution. But, you know, you're still thinking, this is the year that I'm going to get a fresh start. But for others of you, it's bigger than a resolution. You see, you're here and you're just in a season of life where you are in the middle of needing a fresh start. You know, maybe for you, you just got out of a long-term relationship or a marriage or a second marriage. Or you just flunked out of school, or you just lost your job, or you're thinking of transitioning from one career to another career, or you're a parent and your home life, it just stays the same, and that same is never good. And you just want a fresh start at home. Or you're married, and your marriage, it's not going in the right direction, and you want a fresh start with your marriage. You know, the big idea for this series as we talk about the next year is this. It's how can we make sure that the next time isn't like the last time, that it won't end up like the last time. And all of us here, whether we realize it or not, whether we're in the middle of it now or we're going to be this year, there is going to be a next time in our life. And we want to make sure the next time is better than the last. And so here's what I want you to do. I want you to journey with us through the next couple of weeks as we go through this series. Also, I want you to jump on our website and hit the Fresh Start tab. And on the Fresh Start tab, there's actually some daily devotions that go along with our series that you can just read along with every day. That'll take you further than what we can go here. And for some of you, as we go through this series, this is just going to be such a hot button topic for you. I mean, this is where you're living right now. And you want to go further with what we're talking about. Well, I want to encourage you to join a short-term group. And a short-term group is just you get with a smaller group of people and you're going to talk about what we talk about here, but you're going to go more in depth. And then it's short-term and it breaks apart or disbands after the series is over. And so you can head out to the Info Hub and sign up here. Now, let me tell you why I'm so excited about this series. As a pastor, I get to meet with a lot of people. And I get to hear a lot of stories. I know you get to hear a lot of stories as well. But I get to hear a lot of stories of people making life-altering decisions. And as I'm sitting there and I'm listening to people tell me their story and about the decisions that they're making, inside, here's what I'm thinking. You don't want to do that. You don't want to go there. Just say no. Just turn away. Don't take that job. I mean, inside, I'm thinking all these things, but I don't say anything because I know they're not in a place to hear me, and they're not in a place to hear anyone else. But you know what they do? They go ahead and do it, and as a result, the results turn out bad, and then they're in this place where they need a fresh start once again. And I tell you, as a pastor, it just breaks my heart to see people make decisions and then experience the mistakes, and then they repeat those mistakes over and over and over again. And so what we want to do, or as we've looked at some of these stories, there are some basic elements in these stories that if we get these right, we can make sure that the next time is so much better than the next time, or than the last time. So here's where we're going to begin today. I want to begin today by talking to you about something that is true of all of us, but it's something that we don't think about very much. And it's not going to seem real complicated, but it is really, really interesting when you think about it. And here it is. Here's the first thing. We learn from our mistakes in the areas that matter least. I want you to think about this. From technology, you're texting, and you want to text your wife, and you're texting your wife, honey, I had a great time last night. And her name is Diane, but you just hit D as you're sending it, and Donna pulls up, and you send it to a Donna, and you send that to her. That happens to you once. You know what you do from now on? You reread your texts. Simple things like, maybe a video game or a board game. You make a mistake, and someone says, hey, don't do it that way anymore. Okay, I won't do that anymore. And you don't. Sports, hobbies, different things like that. We do that. For a wedding gift, we got a gas grill, not assembled. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to try to tackle this thing. I mean, I can hardly use a hammer, but I'm going to try to tackle this thing. And so one day, get it out of the box, get everything. I take the directions, look at those, and I set those aside because those are for when you want to do it right the first time. And so I set those off to the side. And then, like any big project, and guys, we know this, it had its ebb and flows. Got to this point where seemingly there wasn't enough parts. And so what did I do? I looked around and I go, there are enough parts. I'm going to have to take this back, I guess. But I kept going, and then it got to a point where it was like, there's too many parts. Why did they give us all these parts? And then eventually, 6 hours later, and many times asking for forgiveness to God during that time, 6 hours later, the grill got done. And here's what's interesting about it. If you know how poorly I am working with my hands, I'm thinking to myself, gas and my construction project here. I mean, who wants to turn this thing on, But I took it outside and did it. Now, here's the thing. Years later, we had to get another grill. And guess what I learned from my experience when we went out to buy a new grill? Buy one already assembled, all right? And we paid the extra money, and we did that. Why? Because we learn from the things that matter least. But we repeat the same mistakes from the things that matter most. Things like finances, things like relationships, things like parenting, things like our career. We repeat the same mistakes, and then we experience the fallout of those mistakes. And as we do that, we ask ourselves this all-important question. And we all ask ourselves this question. Here it is. When will I learn? And the most important word in that question is the word I, because here's the thing. The common denominator in all your mistakes is you. And the common denominator in all my mistakes is me. And so we make these mistakes, and as we repeat them over and over and over again. Why? Because we learn from the things that matter least, but we repeat the same mistakes from the things that matter most. Now, here's why we're doing this series. Life is tough enough. And we get things thrown into our life, pain thrown into our life that we can't avoid. Why would we want to make it tougher by adding things in our life that we can avoid? So over the next 3 weeks, here's where we're going. Over the next 3 weeks, we're going to talk about 3 dynamics that we all need if we're going to have a fresh start. And these 3 things, as we talk about them, you're going to go, I never would have thought about that. I would never think about starting there. And so these are very, very practical, and we're going to talk about these over the next 3 weeks. And so I want to encourage you to come back as we do that. Now today, before we do that, today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about 3 myths. And these myths are things, these are assumptions that drive our decision making. And these things drive our decision making, and they are the very reason why we repeat the same mistake over and over and over again. Now let me just say this. Today I am going to unload a bunch of information on you, just to kind of introduce this whole thing more than we usually do. And so I appreciate, just staying in there, but I'm going to unload a bunch of stuff on you. And if you're here and you're a church person and you're like, I got to have a lot of Bible verses and all that stuff, we're only going to talk about one Bible verse, and it's not until the end. And so if that makes you nervous, I'm just going to let you know you're going to be nervous. Come back next week and you won't be nervous anymore. All right, so we're going to talk about 3 myths that are assumptions that we make that drive our decision making. Here's myth number 1. It's called the experience myth. Experience makes me wiser. In light of what I just went through, I'm smarter. I am now wiser. But here's the thing. Experience doesn't make us wiser. Experience makes us older. Experience makes us poorer. Experience can make us madder. Experience can even make us lonelier. You see, an experience in one area of our life doesn't mean we're any more prepared for the second time than we were for the first time. And this is important because for many of us, when we go into a second time with something, I'll often have to say, hey, you ought to read this, you ought to check this out, you ought to go see counseling over this, you ought to do this. And here's what I get. I've had an experience. I don't have to do that now because I know what not to do. Because we believe experience makes me wiser. But here's the key. Evaluated experience makes you wiser. And we all know this through watching people in our life. Because we've all had people in our life, and we've watched them, and they've made the same mistake over and over again. They date the same people, they marry the same people, they mismanage their finances over and over again, they hop from job to job to job to job to job, and we're just thinking, what are you thinking? You see, why? Because they never learned from their past. They never learned from their previous experience. You see, evaluated experience, when done the right way, sets us up for success the next time. So over the next 3 weeks, we're going to talk about some ways to evaluate our experiences, and we're going to give you the tools to do just that. And so that's the first one. Experience makes me wiser. Now, here's the second myth that we buy into. Since I know better, I'll do better. Since I know better, I do better. We assume that just because we know that we automatically will do. Now, if you have kids here, especially teenagers, you know this is a myth. Because you've had a time where you've told your teenager, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. What did they do anyways? They did it even though they knew better. And not only do teenagers do this, but we transition this, we take this with us as adults. You see an ad on the internet and it says 6 months, same as cash, 6 months interest free. And you're thinking, you know what? I didn't realize I needed a jacuzzi in the kitchen, but I guess I'll get one anyways because the deal's way too good to pass up. And so you get it, and for 6 months, no payments, no interest, you're loving it. And then month 6 hits, and you get socked with a big bill with a big interest tab attached onto it as well. And it sets you back months. And then you're paying that off, and then you see another ad and it says 12 months, same as cash, and you're like, How could that be wrong? And you do it again. This is true in relationships. This is why some of you, your current bad relationship reflects your last bad relationship, which will spill over into your next bad relationship. And see, here's what you're asking. What's wrong with all these people that I date? Let me give you the answer. You pick them. You pick them. And here's the other part of it. Not only do you pick them, they pick you, and you allow them to pick you. You don't say no. And all your friends are asking you, why do you keep doing that? Why do you keep doing that? And you're thinking, because I know better, because I know better. No, you don't. You see, here's the reality. Reality is this. Just because I know better doesn't mean you'll do better. Knowing does not equal doing. And the reason why this is so important is because, now that I've had an experience, and now since I know better, now because of that, I'll automatically do better. But here's the thing. That's not true. You see, because your greatest regret, I guarantee you, there is an element in that regret where before it happened, you knew better and you still did it anyways. You see, knowing doesn't equal doing. You see, because if you decide to do, here's the thing. If you think you know that you'll be able to do, here's the thing. There's no guarantee, because knowing doesn't mean you have the ability to do. Knowing doesn't mean you have the will to do. Knowing doesn't mean you have the desire to do. You see, if we're going to get past this myth, we have to be willing to evaluate our experience. We have to say, okay, now that I've had this experience, and now that I have some information because of that experience, what do I need to do before the next time that I didn't do the last time? And we're going to talk about that over the next couple of weeks. So that's the second myth. Now here's the third one. This third one is probably the most difficult. Time is working against me. What causes many of us to make quick decisions, to make bad decisions, is because there's this feeling in our life that time is working against us. I mean, think about some of the things that we say. We say things like this: my options are limited. There'll never be another girl like her. There'll never be another guy like him. There'll never come another one like that. We say things like this. My clock's running out. We'll say things like, everybody my age is, my family is, and we fill in there because we just feel like time is just working against us and it's pulling against us. And this is so tough for us because if you're in a season right now where you're feeling this, it's like you're on a treadmill and it's going really slow. And everybody else is on one and it's going faster and faster and faster and faster. They're all getting married, you're still single. They're having kids, you're not. They're advancing in their career and financially and all that stuff, and you're not. And you're thinking, all I need to do is blank, because time is your enemy. But here, this one, probably of all the myths, is the most destructive. And here's why. We think, I've had this experience, and now I know better. Now I know better. And so I just need to jump back out there and get after it all again. But here's the thing. Time is not your enemy. Time is your friend. Now, we feel the opposite. We feel like it's not. But time is your friend. And if you want to have a fresh start in something in your life, you have to understand this idea of time, that time is actually your friend. This is true of every transition we will make in our life, this whole idea about time. It is true of anything. For example, if you're going from one relationship to another right now, whether it be a long-term relationship, dating, or things like that, here's what will often happen. There's a break in that relationship, and as a result, there's hurt because of that break. Whatever it is, whether it be your fault or the other person's fault, and we always know it's the other person's fault, but whatever it may be, there's hurt in that time. And when there's hurt in our life, we get out of balance. And we need time to find our balance again. And here's why. Our emotions are like a temperature gauge. They go up and they go down. They go up and they go down. And it's easier for them to go up than for us to bring them down. And what many of us don't realize is that when they're up here, we are carrying around all sorts of stuff with us that we don't realize we're carrying around. We're carrying around bitterness, and we're carrying around resentment, and we're carrying around anger, we're carrying around jealousy, we're carrying around pain. And here's the whole idea of pain. When we're in pain, we become self-absorbed. It's not your fault. It's just the nature of pain. If you've ever been around someone with migraines, which is just such a tough thing to deal with, and maybe some of you deal with this, when you're going through an episode of migraines, you don't want anyone talking to you. Why? Because you're self-absorbed. You're in pain. You can't help it. And not only is that true physically, it's also true emotionally. When we are going through emotional pain, when we're going through that, we become self-absorbed. Now, you know this. There's been someone in your life that has went through a very, very difficult time. And while they were going through that difficult time, you would be having conversations with this person. And you're talking about the game, and you're talking about that. And what automatically happens? They bridge the conversation to what their pain is. If you're in a Ridge group here, and some of you, you were in a Ridge group before, or in a Ridge group now, and there's someone in the group that's going through a very difficult time. And you know who that person is. You know this. You go to group that night and you're thinking, all right, I just need to stay away from that person. Because every time, I start talking about something, they bridge that gap. They bridge that conversation to their pain. And why? They're just self-absorbed. They don't know it. They're just self-absorbed. And they'll say to you, they go, I just love my group. I got a lot out of last night. And you're going, of course you did. That's all you did was talk about your problems and all that stuff, and it was her fault last year. And it's going to be her fault this year, and you're kind of going, you're going through the whole thing. It's because they're self-absorbed. That's what pain does. Here's the point. Self-absorbed people make self-absorbed decisions. We all do. We can't help that. And so to just jump into the next thing, whatever the next thing is for you, without taking the time to let the temperature come down, without finding balance in our life, is a bad idea. And the only way we can do that is to realize that time is not our enemy. Time is our friend. Now, when I have talked to people about these myths before, I get this look. It's a look that many of you are giving me now, but it's this look. And I get it. They don't even have to say anything to me. Here's what they're thinking. Here's what they're thinking. I'm the exception. I'm the exception. Listen, Mark, if you knew my whole story, if you knew what was done, if you knew what was said, if you knew all that stuff, listen. If you knew all those things, if you knew my circumstances, you tell me, you're right. Get back out there. Start again, start dating, start spending, head to that career, just go for it. Get back out there. Take the plunge. And the reason why we think that is because we think our circumstances are unique. But let me tell you something about your circumstances, and it's true of my circumstances. And when I tell you this, you're not going to like it. I get it. I don't even like saying it, but here's what it is. Your circumstances aren't unique. Your situation and challenges are not unique. And after you've heard story after story after story, you will start to realize that your circumstances and your situation is not unique. It's just your version that's playing out in your life that's played out in thousands of lives before. We just don't realize it because we're emotional and we're in the middle of it and we can't see it. You see, the reality is, if we want a fresh start, no matter what it is, we have to be willing to evaluate our experience, and that always takes time. Now, one of the really great things about the Bible is that the Bible is filled with people just like us, and many of us actually know about these people. They're people filled like us that have stories just like us, where they went through a season where they needed a fresh start, where there was a time where they started something, it failed, and they started again. Bad start, stop, fresh start. And some of these people are some of the most well-known people. These are people that made significant comebacks that God used in very, very significant ways. For example, Moses. Many of you here have heard of Moses before. Moses was born a Hebrew, but he was raised in Pharaoh's family. And so he walked like an Egyptian. He talked like an Egyptian, but he said, I'm a Hebrew baby. And so he had a heart for his people. And so there was a time where he tried to set them free from slavery, and he killed someone. Didn't work. He had to flee, and then eventually he comes back, and he becomes the savior of Israel. David. He gets appointed king in the future, but during that time, he is living in the palace of the current king, King Saul. And Saul becomes jealous of David and kicks him out of the palace, and he is gone in the wilderness for years and years and years, and eventually he comes back and becomes king. And a guy named Paul, who was a Jewish leader, who persecuted, who killed Christians, eventually he becomes one. And then years later, he plants churches and writes most of what we know as the New Testament. Now, here is the thing about all of their stories. Where there was a first time that moved into a second time, in the middle here, there is a very large gap of time. With Moses, it was 40 years. With David, it was 12 or 13 years. And with Paul, it was 14 years. And not only in this time was there this gap of time or this interval of time, something else comes out of this time that not only came out for them, was true for them, but my prayer is it becomes true for you as well. And here's what came out of this time. They came out of this time with just this divine sense of purpose, where when they came out of this time, they sensed that God was up to something in their life, and they didn't want to miss it. And not only that, but there was just this abiding humility that whatever was going to happen in their life from there, it was bigger than just their life. You see, here's what's true of all of us. When we first start something, we have this idea that everything is going to be perfect. I mean, we're going to go to the perfect college, we're going to get the perfect job. And then as we get our perfect job, we're going to meet the perfect person. And we even call that person perfect. We say, I'm going to meet Mr. Right or I'm going to meet Mrs. Right. And we know they're not going to be right all the time, but, they're perfect. And so, we call them that. And then we're going to raise the perfect family. Everyone else's kids act up. Our kids will never act up. They'll never do that. They'll sit in restaurants and never throw a tantrum, Our kids will be perfect. And so, we have this idea that everything is going to be perfect. And, we even pray prayers that hope that everything remains perfect. We say, all right, God, make sure I get an A. God, give me that job that I want. God, bring the person that I want. God, my kids, I want my kids to do a certain thing, certain way. I want a certain number of kids and all that stuff. Our prayers are completely focused on what we want and where we want to go. Now, that's okay, but then eventually life hits, and we realize things aren't perfect. That job we got wasn't what we expected. That person we married wasn't what we expected. Our kids develop a mind of their own. And then we realize things aren't perfect, and we're in a place now where we need a fresh start. And the people that I've talked to that have made a successful transition from first start to second start, there's just some certain things that are in place. And the big one is they were willing to hit the pause button and take the time needed to let the temperature go down. And during that time where they let the temperature go down, there was a focus on God and a commitment to how He would see things in their life. And when they get out on the other side of it, there's this sense of purpose that I just sense God's going to do something in this next season of my life. And there's this humility of I'm going to work hard, I'm going to pray hard, I'm going to do my best, I'm going to set goals, I'm going to be a high achiever, but whatever happens, I want what God has for my life. And when you talk to people on the other side of it, they'll say, I hated the time, I hated going through the process, but now I see God was readying me for this next season of my life. And you've probably met someone like that, and I want that for you. So here's what I'm going to close with. I'm going to close with one verse that's written by a guy named Paul. And Paul, what many of us don't realize, here was a guy who needed a huge fresh start because he had done some things in his past that left him totally embarrassed to be around Christians because of what he had done to them. But he went through this process, and God got him into this place where he leveraged that time to make a significant impact. Here's the verse. Romans 8:28 says this, and we know that in all things, doesn't matter what it is, all circumstances, good, bad, ugly, that God's grace is bigger than whatever circumstances you've experienced. And in all things, these two amazing words, God works. God works. That if you allow him to, no matter what has happened in your life, that God can work and turn it into something good if we allow him to. And this is bigger than everything happens for a reason. This is so much better than that. God works for the good, for those who love him, for those who trust their life with him, for those who literally lean their weight into him, who wake up every day and go, God, your deal over my deal. For those who do that and who have been called according to his, and there's that word, purpose. God can take any circumstance, any situation, and he can turn it into something really significant for those who love him. But we have to be willing to allow him to go through the process and allow us to go through the process so he can do just that. You see, the reality is, whatever it is, there's going to be a next time. It's just going to be your decision on how that next time plays out. Are you just going to jump into what's next and then experience the same thing over and over again? Or will you go through the process? Will you hit the pause button? And will you allow God to work in your life so when you come out, the next time is so much better than the last time? The good news is, when the next time comes, it can be better. It can be great. Not because you hoped it would be, but because you planned for it to be. So over the next 3 weeks, starting next week, we're going to get very, very practical on how to do that. I want to encourage you, read the devotions on the website. Just go through that as we walk through this process. And then let's just see, as we make some fresh starts, let's see what God does. Let me pray for us. God, we all come in here in places in our life where we've failed, we've messed up, we've all done that. What's really cool is that you are willing, if we would allow you to, that you're willing to step in and take that part of our life that we want to forget, that we wish would just go away, and you're willing to do something significant with it, to turn the bad into somehow good. And God, I pray over the next couple weeks that we would allow you to do that. That we would hit the pause button, that we really evaluate things from your eyes, really regain a perspective or gain a perspective that maybe we've never had before. And to just walk through this with you. And God, I pray across this church that steps would be taken, time would be taken, that when we get to the other end, we'll just sense that you were really readying us for something, that there is a divine sense of purpose. It's bigger than us, and you'll take that time and do just that, and we'll be ready for whatever that new fresh start is. God, thank you for how much our lives matter to you, how everything in our life matters to you. And thank you, God, for how you really will work all things to the good for those who love you. Thank you for who you are, and we give you this series in the next couple of weeks and what you're going to do, and we pray this in your name. Amen.